He pointed at me and laughed. "You think I should care about your little free refills?" He said it loud enough that half the cafe turned. What happened next did not just embarrass him, it undermined everything he thought he owned, and it went viral. Every second matters, so do not skip ahead. If you like stories where the arrogant get taken down, hit like and subscribe right now. My name is Hannah Carter. I was 29 at the time, and I was exhausted and embarrassed and oddly calm all at once. I lived above the diner I worked in and paid rent with tips and overtime. 3 days before that night, I had a final notice for my electric bill taped to my fridge. The light bulb in my bedroom flickered until it finally blew, and I couldn't afford to replace it. That same week, my mother called from Ohio to say she could not loan me any more money. I had been giving free refills for months to a young man who came in almost every afternoon, and I thought he was a student. He smiled a lot, he tipped poorly, but talked to me about poetry and politics and asked questions that made me feel seen. Then the senator's son sat at the counter. I had been working that line for 2 years. I knew the squeak of the swivel stools, the exact rhythm of the espresso machine, and the smell that came off the griddle when the bacon caramelized. I knew where the bus trays hid, and how the afternoon light turned the Formica counters a cheap warm gold. Our regulars were small-town people who treated each other like family. Linda, who always ordered the turkey club with no mayo. Marco, the dishwasher who hummed old Motown as he worked. Rosa, our manager, who kept a notebook of who owed her what and who would cover which shift when life fell apart for someone else. I had a college degree that cost me more in loans than I had in my bank account, and a pride that made me wait tables rather than beg. Rosa had caught me on nights when I cried in the mop closet, and she never asked why. She just handed me a paper towel and a bag of leftover biscotti. That week, a man I thought was a student started coming every day at 3 for a refill and a seat at the corner stool. He carried a worn denim jacket. He left a paperback open on the counter. He gave me a smile that was half apology, half arrogance. I would top off his coffee refill without ringing it through, because sometimes kindness is cheaper than counting coins. I did not realize the kindness carried a price. He introduced himself as Matt in fits of conversation and then stopped answering my questions about school. He said he freelanced for a political newsletter and that his father was off and away. Matt should have been a marker, but I was tired and hopeful and human. One rainy afternoon, he left in a hurry and left his jacket. He came back the next morning, and I gave him his jacket and a free refill, and he said thanks, and then the senator's name fell out of his mouth like a coin dropped into a jar. "Senator Charles Pierce," he said, as if the name itself explained everything. I laughed and said, "Well then, Mr. Pierce, you should get better." He did not laugh. He smiled a tight, polite smile and left a card that said Pierce Foundation on the back. I folded that card into my apron pocket and forgot about it until the night he pointed at me. The senator arrived that evening with a small entourage. I do not know why a senator would come to a local diner in the first place, but there they were. Senator Charles Pierce in a navy suit that smelled faintly of cedar. Damien, the aide in thick-framed glasses, Olivia, the communications director who clipped her words like she was editing them mid-sentence, and 2 other men who hovered like shadows. I felt the weight of their presence, the way light shifts when a cloud passes over a street lamp. The room tasted different, tenacity mixed with cheap coffee. The neon sign in the window buzzed like a caged insect. The senator's son sat not at his usual stool, but smack in the center of the counter like he belonged to the place. The first exchange began as small talk, and then it snowballed into something meant to humiliate. She pointed and laughed. "You a server?" he said to me, as if I had invented the word service, and there was shame tied to it. His voice was clipped and precise. He did not know my name. He said to the senator casually, "You should meet my new friend." The room tilted. Everyone turned to look. My face felt heavy with all the people in the room watching me like I was a slow-motion accident. The first dialogue flare erupted quickly and loudly. "Matt, you see her pays her bill and she cleans tables?" "Hannah, excuse me, Matt," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Matt, I was just topping off your drink. I thought you might like more coffee." "Matt, so you are the generous one then?" He laughed. He took a sip and spluttered as if he wanted the audience to see a small human flaw. He tilted his head toward Senator Pierce and joked with an arrogance that made the cafe quiet. "Senator Charles, you met my server." I explained. "This is Hannah. She keeps the place running." "Senator Pierce, good to meet you, Hannah." The senator offered a hand like I was a novelty, not a human being, but a line on his weekend itinerary. "Hannah," it was polite and empty. I
smiled. I shook his hand. My palm was sticky from syrup. I felt the greasy air on my forearms. Linda in the corner tightened her jaw. Marco slowed his mop. The city streetlight outside painted our vinyl seats silver. Matt, he hung the card in the light and said loud enough for other tables to hear. "She gave me free refills for months." That card rustled as he pulled it from his pocket. He said it like a badge, like a confession or a weapon. Suddenly, Olivia's phone chimed, and Damien adjusted his tie as if the moment required optics. "Senator Pierce, you know I do not condone freeloaders," he said with a small, bored smile. The senator's face was practiced humane. He asked who I was and where I worked and what I intended to do with my life. And his questions landed on me like money being counted. His son smirked like he had set a trap. The audience shifted. Condescension hung in the air like frying grease. Then Matt said something meant to cut even deeper. He said that I should be grateful for scraps, and that some people were born to dine and some to serve. I felt my stomach fall, like someone had opened a trapdoor under me. The lights in the diner seemed suddenly too bright. The scent of bleach and lemon from where Rosa was wiping the counter felt sharp. The old radio played a song about leaving town, and I could hear each lyric like a taunt. Rosa stepped closer. She is the size of a pocketful of thunder. Rosa. "Hey, manners count," he said. "Do not get smart with my son." He said it with a warning. Under his breath, Senator Pierce smiled apologetically, as if to say, "Sorry about the manners of my family." The first real moment of public degradation had taken place. The room exhaled and then leaned in. That is when recordings started to appear. That is when a regular called a friend with a phone. That is when my coworker Marco reached under the counter and hit record. "Marco, why are you doing this, Matt?" he whispered into his phone while keeping it hidden. "Hannah," I could not stop my hands from shaking. I wanted to make it walk away, like all humiliations sometimes leave if you do not look at them. But I looked, and my look sharpened into something else. It was not what I intended at first. It was more like a memory of every time someone had told me to know my place. I remembered back to 3rd grade when a boy told me girls could not be mechanics, and I yelled I could be anything, and the teacher told me to calm down. I remembered my father telling me to leave town, and the smell of oil and fried bread in my childhood kitchen. I thought of my mother, who taught me to answer with a voice that could
not be bought. That memory swelled into a decision. I would not be humiliated on camera without pushing back. The dialogue swelled into a scene with multiple voices, and it filled the diner with a pressure that made my ears ring. "Olivia, the senator should not be embarrassed by this. Senator Pierce, please control your son, Damien. Sir, let us go." Outside, the noise changed. It felt like the weather before a storm. The street sounded distant, like someone had turned down the volume on the city. People were whispering, phones were turned, and the recording spread like a wet stain across dry fabric. The main confrontation turned into a set of exchanges, the kind that throws sparks. Matt, you still think you are better than us? Hannah, that was the line he used to try to make me small. I did not let it stand. Hannah, no, I do not, I said slowly, and then louder. I work here, I cook here, I pay rent here. The senator's baritone softened for a moment. Senator Pierce, that is not how things are done in my circles, he said, as if circles defined moral law. Marco, hey, she's an honest worker. Jason, the bartender, put down a glass and stood between Matt and me. Jason, do not start. Here we do not tolerate that in this place. Matt, you will regret this, he said, as if he was offering me a threat and a favor. I laughed. Then I think it was a small scared sound, but I laughed loud enough that the clatter of plates seemed to join in. The first moment when the crowd shifted, the screening of power began to falter. At that moment, I did something small and public. I reached across the counter and I took the senator's son's card out of his hand and I folded it in half. I put it on the counter and I slid it toward Rosa. Who wants a free refill for everyone? She asked in that low voice that can fill a room. One by one, people reached for cups. Linda raised her hand quietly, and then the room began to cheer, like we had all been given permission to breathe. My gesture was small, but it had resonance. It framed him as a child in a room full of adults, and the camera caught the way his face dropped. I could see his pride collapse like a ruined soufflé. It was strange to realize how a public gesture can undo a private arrogance. Before the first wave of outrage could settle, I took a breath and spoke. And this is important. I did not scream. I did not beg. I said something that was precise and slow and that landed in the recording like a claim. Hannah, you can laugh at me if that makes you feel larger. But watch for the recording, because people remember who they are when someone
else points out the truth I said, and my voice was not a demand. It was a ledger of small grievances and a long past of scraping by. People started to record openly now. Phones came out like small cameras in a courtroom. Olivia tried to hush them, but the hush felt ridiculous, like trying to press water into a closed hand. Then Senator Pierce's phone chimed, and his face changed. The first small ripples of repercussion had started. At around 1/3 into the story, I need to ask you a question. If you are feeling the anger or the relief right now, I get it. Have you ever seen someone publicly humiliated by wealth and power? Share your experience below. Start your comment with, "I saw," and then tell in one line what happened and how you felt. Your words matter. They give courage to others, and they shape the stories we tell. Now back to what came after, because the rest escalated fast. The viral moment was not a single clip. It was many small clips stitched together by feeds and feeds of people who felt like the scene confirmed something they already believed. A high school friend named Emily posted a clip and tagged a local journalist named Jorge, who then put a short version on a local news site. Linda's niece, who runs a neighborhood Facebook group, shared it, and overnight the video jumped from a few thousand views to 1 million. Within 48 hours, the footage was on national feeds. It had 32 million views in a week. The recording showed a pattern, not just of one rude remark, but of entitlement, a scripted arrogance that made lines like, "You are a server, not a person," land like punches. The comments filled with words like humiliation, indignation, and solidarity. It was astonishing to watch social pressure move like a tide. The senator's office sent out a statement saying they were looking into it.
The communications director, Olivia, posted a cautious apology that did not name names but suggested lessons would be learned. It was perfunctory and thin. The consequences edged into public life quickly. Senator Charles Pierce had to speak to constituents. He did not call me. He issued a statement. He said family members sometimes made mistakes. He called for privacy and promised an inquiry. The press smelled contradiction, like fish in the sun. Olivia resigned from her role after someone dug up a thread in which she had mocked service workers in private messages. Damien was reassigned to a remote advisory desk, and 2 donors pulled their support from the Pierce Foundation. Marco's recording found its way to a watchdog journalist named Sam, who had a nose for patterns. Sam called out more examples of privileged behavior from the senator's circle. That is when a campaign manager at the senator's office decided to step down, and when a private contractor cut ties because they
could not be associated with reputational risk. The word that kept appearing in headlines was repercussion. A lot of reporters used the word justice in a cautious way, and that unsettled the senator's camp. Meanwhile, my life changed in measurable ways. People who had read the comments started sending messages. They asked how they could help. They sent links to crowdfunding pages. A local nonprofit called Community Meals donated $500 to our staff fund. The diner received an influx of customers who wanted to buy meals for workers in appreciation. The owner of a small union in the neighboring city offered legal advice and connected us with an attorney named Rivera who worked on workplace relations. I received offers to speak at local forums, and an independent filmmaker named Aaron asked to interview me about service work and social pressure. I started receiving donations through a GoFundMe that an old regular, Joyce, had set up. It raised $75,000 in a month. Those funds helped pay overdue bills and paid for a new light bulb for my room and a small emergency fund for Rosa and for Marco. We called it the Community Safety Net. It was not about wealth for me. It was about dignity and about proof that when people see injustice, they often respond with solidarity. There were tense moments after the video when I had to choose how public to be. People wanted statements and interviews. I am not someone who wanted the spotlight, but the spotlight was now a tool that could be used for more than my individual revenge. I agreed to one television interview with Jorge because he had covered local issues with care. I turned down some outlets that wanted sensationalism and accepted the ones who asked thoughtful questions. The senator's team tried to discredit the footage. They argued context and argued that the clips were cherry-picked. Marco and I met with an attorney, Rivera, who told us to preserve every file and every witness. That meeting felt like preparing for a trial. Rivera, the law is messy, but the truth is clearer with witnesses, she said, and then she took notes and told us to breathe. I think what she meant was to prepare because the world had started to expect proof. 3 moments of highest tension stayed with me like burn marks. One was the night a conservative talk show host called our diner and suggested the whole thing was staged. The host demanded to speak with me live, and the line filled with callers who wanted to shame me into silence. I remember the fluorescent light over the set of a studio, and the metallic taste in my mouth as I answered a call and said, I worked hard, and I deserved respect. The second moment was when a man showed up to the diner with a camera and a sign that said, Support the Senator. He accosted customers, and the crowd threatened
to expel him. He was eventually escorted out by a neighbor who called him out and who stood between him and our staff. The third moment was receiving an anonymous message that accused me of lying and offered money for me to go away. The message arrived with a low hum across my phone and the smell of rain outside. I showed it to Rosa. We did not respond. We documented it and we told our attorney.
I was terrified in those moments, but I also felt a strange, steady backbone. The fear was real, but so was the support. The true turning point came 3 weeks after the incident when a university announced an investigation into Matthew Pierce's scholarship status. The university released a statement citing conduct unbecoming of a student of its values and said they were reviewing whether to rescind certain privileges. That sent a new kind of pressure back onto the senator. With donors pulling out and with public protests outside his fundraising events, the senator's team asked for a meeting with the diner owner and offered a settlement that included a donation to our community fund, but also a non-disclosure clause. I remember sitting at the small table in the back with Rosa and Marco and the owner, a pale man named Ben, who loved the place but did not want a lawsuit. He asked what I wanted. I said no non-disclosure. I wanted the truth on record, and I wanted any payment to be unconditional. Ben looked at me like I had asked him to balance a ledger with his heart. He agreed in the end, and the diner accepted a modest donation that covered overdue utilities and created a small scholarship for local students who worked while they studied. The senator's office issued a second statement promising sensitivity training and pledging to listen to workers. The statement was thin, but it was public, and that public fact mattered. As the dust settled, people kept reaching out. Offers came in for job interviews at local nonprofits who wanted someone with public speaking potential and grassroots credibility. I received 3 offers in the month after the clip went viral. I accepted a position with a community outreach program at a nonprofit named Harbor House that focused on job training for service workers. It paid better than serving, and it came with the dignity of a steady paycheck. The owner, Ben, arranged for Marco to get a referral for a culinary school scholarship. And Linda received a letter from a television host offering to feature her in a piece about unsung workers. The Pierce Foundation lost 2 corporate sponsors, and the senator saw his approval ratings dip by 7 points in the county polls. The word demotion appeared in several news stories about the senator's staff, and a longtime fundraiser resigned. In the end, some people faced professional consequences, and some people faced public shaming. But the real measure?
How the community responded. 1 month after the incident, the diner had a plaque in the window that read, "In solidarity with workers." It was small and handmade, and it was crooked, but it felt like an emblem of where we had been and where we were going. The GoFundMe had funded a scholarship and paid for a new espresso machine, which Jason swore made the coffee taste like victory. The senator's office had released a statement promising to review codes of conduct at their public events and had scheduled a closed-door meeting with local business owners. It felt procedural, but it was a start. The town's local paper ran a feature on how small acts of kindness accumulate into community safety nets. I sat in the booth at a quiet time and wrote down every name of the people who had rallied for us. Linda, Emily, Joyce, Marco, Rosa, Aaron, Jorge, Sam, Rivera, Ben, and Joyce again. These were the people who had moved in solidarity. 3 months later, the national press had moved on to other stories, but our local reality had expanded. I started at Harbor House, and the money from the donation covered a small moving van to get my things from the apartment above the diner to a 2-bedroom. I rented with a roommate whose name was Anya. She was in a program for green jobs, and she taught me how to plant herbs on a fire escape. The scholarship fund had its first recipient, a young woman named Keisha, who worked nights and wanted to study nursing. She brought a cake to the diner to say thank you and cried into a napkin while we all hugged. Her tears tasted like relief. The senator's son had been suspended from a university committee, and a brand that had once rented him image rights had severed ties. The campaign contributions to the senator had a slow bleed, and one major paper published an editorial on privilege and public service that quoted my conversation from the diner. It was surreal to read my own voice reflected in a national column. 6 months later, the community had shifted in small, practical ways.
The diner instituted a policy about respectful conduct and training that Rosa led and that other small businesses in the block copied. Marco had started a weekend breakfast program to train young cooks. We had meetings about wage fairness, and one of those meetings led to a petition for a living wage signed by over 2,000 locals. The Pierce Foundation had reorganized and appointed a new director with a public history in community work. The senator issued a letter about empathy and service that some praised and some ridiculed, but most people treated it as what it was, a political response to pressure. The numbers were clear. The original viral clip had surpassed 50 million views. The GoFundMe hit $80,000, and the community fund had helped 5 workers
with emergency bills and had seeded 3 scholarships. It was not total redemption, but it was measurable change, and that mattered. Looking back, I can say I was humiliated. I can also say that humiliation did not stay on me. It traveled. It transformed into a peculiar kind of power, the power of being seen. When people record, when people speak up, the power imbalance shifts. In the end, the senator's son learned lessons the hard way, and his family faced reproach from donors and from the public. The diner found new customers and a stronger sense of itself. I found a job that paid more and a community that surprised me with its generosity. There was legal advice and an attorney who told us to keep records, and the law helped in small technical ways, but the larger justice came from people who decided that arrogance would not be a free pass. The moral of this is not that kindness always pays, or that every viral moment changes the world, but that solidarity can translate into action, and that proof matters when you call out wrongdoing. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that small acts and collective outrage can produce change. If you ever witnessed someone being shamed by power, write "I saw" and tell one line about what happened and how you felt. Your comment matters, and it might give courage to someone else. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. We tell these stories so the quiet are heard, and so the powerful remember they will be held to account. I still think about that night and the sound of laughter that tried to shrink me. But now that sound reminds me of every person who decided to stand beside me. When power tries to silence you, speak up and record the truth. Because humility and dignity are paid for in different currencies, and sometimes community is the currency that buys justice. Do not let power make you small.